Bob Woodward's new book, Fear, is set to be released later this month. The Washington Post says it's based on interviews with top administration officials and sources close to the administration. It's being published by Simon & Schuster, a division of CBS. The Post released a recording of the president speaking with Woodward, in which Woodward claims he did try to reach the president for comment.
And I don't know how things work over there in terms of getting to you.
Well, if you would call Madeline in my office, did you speak to Madeline?
No, I didn't. But
Madeline is the key. She's the secret because
I talked to Raj
she's
about
the president.
I talked to Kelly.
Well, a lot of them are afraid to come and talk, or they are busy. I'm busy. But I don't mind talking to you. I would have spoken to you. I spoke to you 20 years ago, and I spoke to you a year and a half or 2 years ago.
I understand.
And I certainly don't mind talking to you, and I wish I could have spoken to you.
Okay, let's bring back in CBSN political contributor Caitlin Huey-Burns and CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. First of all, Caitlin, let me start with you. How is the White House reacting to this book? And is it a different kind of reaction than we've seen compared to other books that have been released?
You know, interestingly enough, they're kind of using some of the similar lines, trying to denigrate Woodward, question his credibility, the same lines of attack we saw with that Fire and Fury book released last year by Michael Wolff. There is a key difference here, of course, which is that Woodward is a very well-known, well-respected journalist, of course, from the Watergate era, breaking that story for the Washington Post. Someone who is not seen as a political figure, someone who is seen as someone who does, really the shoe leather reporting, and his sources are valid and very different from what we saw with Michael Wolff. So the White House is going to have a difficult time questioning the credibility of Woodward here. And also because if you listen to that tape, obviously the president was open to talking to him, as he was on that phone call, and said that he was happy to talk to him. And so that all, really, I think, puts a hole in the White House's argument here. But again, this is going to create several days' worth of a drama surrounding this White House, hovering over this White House as they're trying to get their Supreme Court nominee through. The Supreme Court nominee, of course, very important to the Republican base and a key achievement of the president's.
Well, does this book, Ed, Fear, seem different from other books about this White House?
The reason it'll be seen as different is you have to appreciate Woodward's reporting methods. Mm-hmm. He will interview somebody for hours. He will record every conversation if given permission. He will transcribe it. So the notes on this are voluminous. Mm. And in essence, what he's doing here in some respects is providing a far richer and more reputable reporting structure for a lot of what Michael Wolff's book sort of grazed. And he's confirming it now in deeper, more vivid ways, conversations between the White House Chief of Staff and the Defense Secretary and the economic advisors and their concerns about the president's mindset and temperament and understanding of complex issues. A lot of that was covered in the Michael Wolff book, and now is playing out yet again in this book. And I got to say, what's interesting about this, too, is a Woodward book about a presidency is about as swampy as it gets. This is the kind of thing that happens in every presidential administration. Mm-hmm. At some point, he turns his attention to the president and his team and finds something to write about. So it'll be interesting to see how the Trump White House runs up against what is a pretty well-established practice of one of the city's most revered reporters and one of the city's most thorough reporters telling his version of what he's learned and seeing how the president and his team react. We know they've been anticipating this nervously, and it is telling that the Washington Post went out of its way to put out this recording now, potentially anticipating where the president and his attack would go. They probably were sitting there anticipating a tweet from the president saying, well, he never called me. And so now they can sort of show people, actually, we did try to reach him, as that recording shows, Woodward explains that he tried to reach the president through several different people and never heard back. And it's similar to what the exchange was like between the president and Omarosa, where the president sort of claimed that he didn't know that Omarosa had been dismissed. And in this case, the president was saying, well, why didn't you call me?
Right.
And Woodward repeatedly points out over the course of the 11-minute call, I talked to Kellyanne Conway, I talked to Senator Lindsey Graham, they said they would talk to you, I never heard back, so what do you expect me to do?
Yeah, so Ed, to follow up on that point, and also Caitlin's point about the White House strategy going after the credibility of Woodward here, the president has done an interview with the Daily Caller, and this is what he says about the book. Quote, "It's just another bad book. He's had a lot of credibility problems," adding, "I probably would have preferred to speak to him, but maybe not. I think it probably wouldn't have made a difference in the book. He wanted to write the book in a certain way. It's just nasty stuff. I never spoke to him." Then he goes on to say, "Maybe I wasn't given messages that he called. I probably would have spoken to him if he'd called, if he'd gotten through. For some reason, I didn't get messages on it." And now we have the Post taking this step of releasing this conversation on tape. These would seem to be extraordinary times, Caitlin.
Extraordinary times indeed. And what the president is trying to do is, again, kind of win in the court of public opinion and really appeal to his base of support, which is going to see anything written by a journalist put out by the media as an oppositional kind of force. We've seen him do that over and over and over again. But as we've been discussing, the credibility issues here are not the same as they have been with others. This is someone, of course, who is known for being very credible and has people on the record, has all of these wide variety of sources and the tapes and notes, as Ed said, to back it up. I think this does put the White House in a very difficult situation, however, because this is going, again, to be in the news as the book comes out, as pieces and excerpts and other reporting about the book comes out, and people can see for themselves what it says. I'm curious how this prompts the president to respond, to try to distract the news cycle, to try to change the narrative, as we've seen him do over and over again when other things like this come up.
So the president is holding a rally in Montana on Thursday and North Dakota on Friday. Pretty safe bet you think we will see him address this book at those events?
Perhaps, if he doesn't just stick to the normal script. But certainly would be a good opportunity for him to rile up his supporters and get them upset yet again with the news media and try to suggest that his presidency, as he told Bob Woodward, has been successful and well run. And telling, too, that the White House released a multi-point list of achievements that they believe the president can be happy about and it has been touting in defense of this. I think sort of anticipating that this is basically, as the White House put it, disgruntled former employees raising concerns about management and leadership, and the White House saying, no, in fact, this president's done a lot, and here's the proof. So we'll see how he takes this in the coming days, but certainly it'll be fodder for those campaign rallies.
Let's talk about the president's sort of tactical political strategy here, Caitlin. His midterm travel schedule seems to be focused on the Senate map. Why might that be?
Right. Well, the Senate map compared to the House map is very favorable for Republicans. There are 10 states that Democratic incumbents are trying to hold on to in places that Trump won. 5 of those overwhelmingly really deep red states like North Dakota, Indiana, West Virginia, and a couple of others. And so the White House officials have been telling reporters that the president wants to be out on the campaign trail as much as possible. They want to be out there more than Obama was in 2014 and to really ramp up his campaign schedule. And right now they're focusing on states where the president does have a solid base of support, where he is popular and where Republicans do have a chance of taking over a seat or two. And so that's a really interesting dynamic. But I've talked to Republican strategists who say that unlike other presidents, you can't really target this president's appearances in certain states, and it will indeed have a ripple effect across the state, but also in districts. If he goes to Florida, for example, where he won, but very narrowly, there is a competitive House, a competitive Senate race, a competitive governor's race there, and a handful of House races where the president's appearance could put that Republican in jeopardy. majority. And so it's going to be different kind of depending on the state, but the strategy really tells you where the Republicans are wanting the president to be at this point. We have seen him, though, kind of disregard the advice that he's gotten from Senate leadership like Mitch McConnell in terms of endorsements. In some cases, they're trying to get on the same page, and so we'll see kind of whether he sticks to that. We can almost guarantee that he goes off script, and some Senate campaigns I've talked to say that that's just fine, because in some of these states they want to be as close to the president as possible. In other states, of course, that provides a real liability for candidates.
Yeah, and Ed, I'm wondering about the Democrats as well. In the conversations that you've been having, I wonder, how are Democrats preparing for the possibility that they could take back the House this fall?
Well, you've seen in the last few days, Democrats sort of start to lay out the kinds of things that they would do, at least in the House, should they take back control. There's push for a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure package, work on health care issues, because that has been, in their view at least, a top issue of concern to voters this year, and then launch dozens potentially of investigations in the various committees of Trump administration activities, while at the same time waiting to see what Robert Mueller and company come up with and potentially engage in impeachment. I think most of what this is about in the last few days is to try to push back against the idea that it would automatically mean an attempt to start impeachment proceedings as quickly as possible. What they're trying to say is, no, we're worried about economic development, shoring up the healthcare system, and yes, providing a check on an otherwise corrupt administration, what they believe to be a corrupt administration. We'll see if that works, and we'll also see whether it's embraced by all House candidates across the country. There's been a lot of sort of decentralization of the themes that candidates are hitting on this year, but if you keep it to those three, that may be just the right kind of mix that candidates across the country could talk about.
It'll be fascinating to see which strategy wins. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe, thanks to you both.